Hey, we're on Mount of Olives near Jerusalem right now. This is the east side of Jerusalem, and this is the well-known place where Jesus prayed and spent some time with his disciples. But we're overlooking the city of Jerusalem, as you can see. You know, one of the things that stand out when you look at Jerusalem, you see the golden dome right there, the Dome of the Rock. And this is a Muslim shrine. And then left to that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is a well-known Muslim mosque. But actually the place where this is built on is the Temple Mount, which is originally a Jewish site, but the Muslims have claimed that. And on that Temple Mount, on the other side, there's the Western Wall, which is where all the Jews are praying. You know the images from the television, I'm sure. But this Temple Mount is a very important place throughout biblical history. There's some that believe, and me including, that this mount in the back right here, Jerusalem is built on Mount Zion, that this mount is actually the place where the Garden of Eden was, where Adam and Eve lived. I truly believe that because biblically that has the most evidence, I think. It's also the place where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac, and it's referred to as Mount Moriah back in those days, but I believe Mount Moriah is the same mountain as Mount Zion. Also, this is the place where Solomon built the temple. King David wanted to build a temple, but he wasn't allowed to because he was a man of war. But he had bought this field, a threshing field of Arona, to stop the plague. And this land was now available. He wanted to build a temple there, but the Lord stopped him from doing that. And then his son Solomon built a temple right there. The first temple was a magnificent temple. That temple got destroyed by the Babylonians. And then about 70 years later, it was rebuilt by people like Ezra and Haggai and Zerubbabel. Those were the ones that you can find a lot of history there in the Bible, who rebuilt this site and built a second temple. And a lot of Jewish literature is from that era of the Second Temple period. It was rebuilt back then. And then later on, around the turn of the millennium, when Jesus was born, Herod, he rebuilt it, he beautified it again and made Herod's temple right there, which was magnificent as well. That temple got destroyed back in 70 AD when the Romans came against Jerusalem because of this big uprising of the Jews. They destroyed the city, they destroyed the temple, it was gone. Nothing left anymore. But still you have the Temple Mount obviously there, and then hundreds and hundreds of years later the Muslims came and rebuilt their own shrine back there and the mosque. There's this really interesting prophecy in Zechariah 14, which speaks about the coming day of the Lord. And basically what it says is that Jesus, or the Messiah, obviously Zechariah doesn't mention the name Jesus, but Zechariah says hey, Messiah will come, will set his foot on Mount of Olives, and will get to the city. But there will be some crazy things happening before that time. There will be Gentile nations coming against Jerusalem, coming against Israel. And we're living in a day where we're actually seeing this. Anti-Semitism is flaring up again. The hate of Israel is flaring up even amongst the European nations. It's going to be very likely that all these nations will come against Israel because of the hate for this nation and will try to destroy it. And then Messiah comes and intervenes as that is happening. But I want to read with you from Zechariah 14, verse 2. It says this, "For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city will go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle." Some people will think that this is about the Romans destroying Jerusalem in 70 AD, but there's a lot of stuff here that hasn't been fulfilled yet. So this points to a future time. "On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mount shall move northward and the other half southward." So this speaks about a return of Yeshua. It speaks about a return of Jesus the Messiah, of Jesus the Christ to the Mount of Olives. I mean, he was here once, but he's going to return and make everything happen that's in this prophecy. "And you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azal. You shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come and all the holy ones with him." This speaks about believers in Yahweh, in Yeshua, coming together with him to bring in this new time, this new age when Jesus has returned. Let's continue to verse 8. On that day, living waters shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea, which is the Dead Sea, and half of them to the western sea, which will be the Mediterranean. It shall continue in summer as in winter. There's this other prophecy, Ezekiel 47, that speaks about the temple and a stream coming from that temple. This is a eschatological temple. The Lord's going to build it himself, and water's going to flow from that place all the way to the Dead Sea. And Zechariah basically builds on that as well. And the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, the Lord will be one and his name one. Actually, it literally says, and Yahweh will be king over all the earth. On that day, Yahweh will be one and his name one. This is a direct reference to Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Shema, Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And it doesn't mean that there's no Son and that there's no Holy Spirit. No, it says echad, which can be a unity of multiple persons in that unity. So it actually explains the Trinity right there. And then the whole story continues right there. Verse 16, then everyone who survives of all the nations, the Lord's fighting against those Gentile nations. Everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. So the Feast of Tabernacles, as it's being celebrated in Israel and amongst Jews every year, is like a prophetic foreshadowing of what's going to happen right here, that all nations will participate in it. And if any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them. And if the family of Egypt does not go up and present themselves, then on them there shall be no rain. There shall be the plague with which the Lord afflicts the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. This shall be the punishment to Egypt and the punishment to all the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. This is so amazing. There's going to be this day when the Feast of Booths, an eschatological Feast of Tabernacles, will be celebrated here in Jerusalem. And this feast is all about the presence of Yahweh, the presence of the Lord in this place, and that we get to spend time with him in the New Jerusalem here in this place. And I'm so thankful for that day that's coming.